I call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, October 11, 2021, and the time is 7 p.m. We are present this evening in our school board meeting room located at Northfield Public Schools District offices. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the district website as soon as possible. Before proceeding, I just want to remind those present that on August 9th, 2021, the board adopted a resolution that requires all people over the age of 2 to wear a face covering that fully covers the nose and mouth at all times while inside a Northfield School District facility, including during school board meetings and also when you present at the podium. Before we begin tonight, I want to acknowledge that today is Indigenous Peoples Day. In June of 2021, the board adopted policy 950 that formalized a statement from the Northfield School District that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples. The 2020-21 District Youth Council's Equity and Inclusion Subcommittee on behalf of the District Youth Council proposed a land acknowledgement be formally adopted by the board. We are grateful for the student input that led to the board adopting this policy. This statement will be read at board meetings nearest to Indigenous Peoples Day, the board's organizational meeting each January, and at the Northfield High School and Area Learning Center's commencement ceremonies. We are delighted tonight that Northfield High School senior Amelia Arnold is here to read this statement. Amelia was instrumental in leading the student subcommittee to draft the statement, as well as her work with the district's policy committee on its adoption by the board. So welcome, Amelia.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? This good? All right. Hello, everyone. The Northfield School District recognizes that we reside on the homeland of the Wapakute tribe of the Dakota Nation. We acknowledge the wrongdoings, previous and ongoing, and strive to repair and strengthen our relations with Indigenous peoples. Thank you.
Thank you, Amelia. Okay, we'll move on. Dr. Hillman, there were a number of some personnel items in the table file.
Yes, this evening we have a couple of appointments and we have a few increase, decrease, and changes in assignment, and that is all we have in the table file this evening.
Okay, thank you. If there's no objection, we'll add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Moved by Jeff. Is there a second? Second by Corey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We now have opportunity for public comment. This is an opportunity for residents, business and property owners, parents, guardians, students, and employees of the Northfield School District to address the board. All comments to the board must adhere to the guidelines set in place by District Policy 206 regarding public comment. This is not a time to debate an issue, but only for the board to hear your comments. You are prohibited from making comments about specific students, staff, and administrators. The board respects and values input when it relates to a specific individual or to a specific matter. This input must be heard by the appropriate personnel, including building principal or superintendent, and not during an open meeting of the school board. You will be gavelled out of order if your comments are not in compliance with these guidelines. Please address the podium from the board. After being recognized by the board chair, identify yourself in a if you represent one. We require that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You are not allowed to yield your time to another person. It is expected that members of the public will address their remarks with civility and respect. Personal attacks by anyone addressing the board are unacceptable. And again, we just want to remind those that when speaking from the podium, you will need to leave your mask on. Vice Chair Amy Gorwitz will be monitoring speakers' time. She will signal each speaker with the time they have remaining at 1 minute, 30-second, and 10-second intervals. Again, please make your comments as brief as possible, but no more than 3 minutes. So I'll begin now to call up those who signed up to speak in the order in which they signed in. So I welcome Carol Mint. Welcome, Carol.
Yes, thank you very much for having me today and for giving me this chance to speak. I'm here to speak to the board in favor of the mask policy for the Northfield School District. I have 2 children in school and they are both in high school and they need to both stay in school, not only for their educational benefit, but their social and emotional well-being and also for my and my husband's work schedules. And the way that we can keep our kids in school is to have them masked, which the science says works. So I am here to support the school board mask policy and to let you know that there's many people in this community that do support that. And my kids wear their masks. They wear them to school every day. And I don't have any complaints from my own children about wearing masks. They're happy to wear them because they know that it's going to keep them healthy and safe and in school. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Our next speaker is Christy Purcell. Welcome, Christy.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Board. My name is Christy Purcell, and I have two children who are in Spring Creek Elementary School. They are too young to be vaccinated. And I just wanted to come here and say thank you for making the hard decision to help protect our students, our teachers, our staff. They don't even notice anymore that they are wearing a mask, and they report back to me it is a small price to pay to get to see their friends, to get to be at school, and to get to learn in person with our amazing teachers. And I just want to thank you for making that decision to keep us all healthy and safe.
Thank you, Christy. Our next speaker is James Demas. Welcome, James.
Thank you, board, for the opportunity to also express my gratitude for this board's decision to put science, epidemiology, public health, and the safety of our students at the top of their policy decision-making. So I'm very grateful. I too have two children that are in the district, and they, I think honestly, we're pretty anxious about getting back to school. And one of the things that really made them feel safe and secure was the district's policy. And I know they would be really distracted in their studies if they didn't see other students, faculty and staff wearing their masks indoors. So again, thank you for this policy and for keeping those who can't yet be vaccinated safe, and for members of our community that have underlying health conditions, keeping them safe as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. Our next speaker is Rachel Trinka. Welcome, Rachel.
Hello, good evening. My name is Rachel Trinka, and yes, I'm the one that keeps emailing you and asking a lot of questions last month and a half. I just want to clarify that I'm honestly not trying to be a pain in the rear. With all of my annoying email, not annoying, but my drawn out emails, but I think we can all agree that COVID protocols, mandates, and requirements are a major topic of question and concern within the entire United States, worldwide, within school districts, hospitals, and many other places. My latest email, I am not struggling with or disagreeing with your COVID policy. I'm trying to just merely ask some questions about the protocols because of their inconsistency and lack of transparency of information. Thus, I'm standing here tonight to voice my thoughts and ask some questions. I understand that you cannot answer these questions during the public comment session, so if you ever do, feel free, please reach out. There have been multiple additions to the COVID protocols since August 16th, including close contact, quarantine, and testing policies. What are the factors you are looking at to implement these now protocols? If this is due to the evolving response to COVID-19, what exact data and factors are making you change your response to adding new protocols almost weekly to the plan? I'd also have a question regarding the district's COVID-19 protocols. As to quote, the district has also taken into account the social, educational, political, and financial considerations of these protocols. I'm especially wondering what political and financial considerations you're taking into account. There's still nothing holding the school accountable for the off-ramp of these mandatory protocols and requirements. We as stakeholders, the parents, the students, the staff, the community, we deserve to know what the future looks like for the Northfield Public Schools. I know this has been mentioned, difficult to communicate. However, there has to be certain numbers, dates, data that you're looking at and can share with us. It has been almost 5 weeks into the school year, and we have yet to hear anything of the off-ramp. You mentioned possibly looking at the 6-week mark and reevaluating. Is this something that we can expect to happen? If not, when could we? It is my duty as a parent, as a community member, as a stakeholder, to research and question everything for the sake of my children and to not blindly trust. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Rachel. Our last speaker is Amy Gurnon Edwards. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you for having me here. I have 4 children, one of which is too young to be vaccinated, and I just wanted to offer my support and thanks for the continuing mask mandate. And I thought I would give a little story of something that happened to us recently and why I think this still matters for the health of our whole community. One of our children had to get their appendix out about a week ago, and we were at the Northfield Hospital. We got great care the whole time. But when we got there were 25 people ahead of us because Mayo had been diverting patients and the city hospitals were full. They had to open a secondary ER in the day surgery center, and we waited once we knew we had to get surgery for at least an hour or 2 because we got the last staffed bed in the hospital that night. So the idea is that this isn't just about school, it has ripple effects for our community and for our healthcare, I think are important to consider. So thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, that concludes our public comment portion of the meeting this evening. So we'll move on to announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, we have several this evening. Some good news to share. So the first piece is I want to share some really good news that we've talked with you last spring, but I'm happy to report that Bridgewater Elementary Principal Nancy Antoine officially received her National Distinguished Principal Award from the National Association of Elementary School Principals last Friday night in Washington, D.C. And we know that the National Distinguished Principal Award is the most prestigious award that a principal can win in the state of Minnesota. And we all know how great of a principal and what a great leader Nancy Antoine is. And so we're thankful that she received that award. And just for the board members know, we'll have her at a meeting upcoming to share her experience receiving this award. So congratulations to Nancy. We also want to share with you, we have an exciting new effort happening in our technology and engineering department at Northfield High School. Steve Taggart, a longtime middle school tech ed teacher who's now teaching at Northfield High School, is working with Ford Motor Company, and he started participating in something called the Ford Automotive Career Exploration Program. And we're working on the next steps, which includes getting sponsors from a dealership. And what happens is the dealership will come a couple times a year. They're a member of an advisory group. They offer job shadowing for students in a career that we all know we could use more people in. And so this automotive career exploration program, there's a web-based curriculum that goes along with it. There are 65 different courses on automotive technologies. Importantly, students would be awarded an industry credentialed certificate upon the successful completion of each course. And these are the same exact courses that new Ford technicians are required to take. And so there's also some donation work that has to go on. And Ford would be donating things like current engines and drivetrains and vehicles to participating schools. And so we all know how important career technical education is. And I think that it's important to share with you when we're making improvements in that area. So we're excited. Program's not underway yet, but have a good start with it. And I want to thank Mr. Taggart publicly for taking that on. We all know that we need more people in those really critical positions. And this is one way that we can have Northfield High School students leave with an industry certificate. And if that's the pathway that they would like to take, they have an opportunity to be well on their way. So it's just getting started. We'll get you some more information, but I wanted you to hear about that here. Also, we have another exciting announcement here that Rice County has been officially accepted as the implementation community. So this is the first replication of a very successful program focused on children's health. And so the Healthy Ways program is formerly called the Healthy Harlem Kids program. It was developed by the Harlem Children's Zone. And Rice County will be the first replication community of this evidence-based program through community schools at Jefferson Elementary in Faribault and Greenville Park in Northfield. It's just an exciting honor and a testament to the level of collaboration and commitment in these communities. And so we're starting to learn about it. One of the first things was to make sure that we could hire someone to lead it. And I'm really thrilled to share with you that we've hired Diego Cabarrio Bravo to be the Healthy Waste Coordinator. He's going to begin his role later this week. He's bilingual in both in English and Spanish, and he grew up here in Northfield, graduated from Northfield High School, where he was a varsity soccer player and a torch student. Yeah, he recently graduated from St. Olaf College, where he double majored in kinesiology and Latin American studies. And so it's always great when we have a student who has graduated coming back to help us lead a new initiative. So we're really grateful to have Diego joining us through that Healthy Ways replication program. And so this is a very well-known evidence-based program focused on children's health, and to be the first replication in the site in the nation through a competitive grant process is pretty impressive. So Erin Bailey in our district has been the contact. So thanks to Erin for her work on that. And those are the announcements that I have for this evening.
Wow, that is really, really exciting. Great stuff. Board members, other announcements or recognitions that you want to acknowledge? I just want to acknowledge the Northfield Area Chamber of Commerce for hosting us for the State of the Schools. Dr. Hillman did a really great presentation, had it done in 15 minutes. So there was time for some really excellent questions from Chamber of Commerce members and community members who were there. We were joined by Board Member Amy Gorwitz, Tom Baraniak, and Noel Stratmone. So it was, we appreciate that the Chamber does give us that opportunity to talk with our community. And of course, it's also an opportunity for us to publicly thank them. I mean, the Ford program is a really good example of how we're going to ask our business community to help us do the work that we want to do, but we don't always have the ability to do. So it's always a great opportunity. And we look forward to that every year. And of course, we thank Benjamin Bus for their sponsorship of the lunch. So, okay. So with that, we can move on to items for discussion and report. The first this evening is the 5-year strategic plan update by Dr. Hillman.
Yes, and I noticed the chuckle in the room, Julie, when you said I kept something to 15 minutes. So this evening, again, we've had a parade of school improvement plans and some other presentations. So you've got just me tonight with a couple of presentations for you. And this first one is just really a very brief, high-level overview of where we're at with the strategic planning process. So I've talked with you about the strategic planning process dating back to last winter. And I wanted to share with you the update as to where we're at and what you can expect in the coming months. So we started holding sessions last spring. And last spring, we held several sessions. They were virtual sessions with our staff, held several of those via Zoom. I also had one of the coolest opportunities I've had in a while to be able to facilitate with a senior science seminar with Jody Saxton West students, the same process that we use in terms of gaining feedback from stakeholders. We also had the Northfield Forward Advisory Committee, the Finance Advisory Committee, and our District Equity Committee provide feedback last spring. Then we took a little bit of a break for the summer. And this fall, we have been holding sessions with families. We have tried to hold these in a variety of different ways and multiple modalities. So in what I think might be the first ever, I tried to hold a session outside in the parking lot so we could have a unmasked session outside. And we had a small but mighty crew there. There was just a few of us that discussed district topics for about 90 minutes. Then we held one indoors, which again was sparsely attended, but again, really positive feedback. We held a Zoom session in which we had 32 people sign up and we had 12 people attend. We are holding another session this Thursday night at the Greenville Park Community School. That session will be completely in Spanish, so it'll be translated. So it's intent for Spanish speaking families. And we're also looking at doing a Zoom with our Spanish speaking families as well, as we found that that's a very successful way to get feedback. So again, we've been out working to try to get feedback from the community. We've promoted it heavily. And just to let people know what we're looking at, we share with people the vision for the district that was created in 2016 as part of the last strategic plan. And then we really walked people through the 5 strategic commitments that we have around people. We are a people business. When you look at any school district in the state of Minnesota, roughly 80% of our budgets are salaries and benefits. We hire people to do good things for kids, and that's a major part of what we do every day, right? So we are here to serve kids. We're here to serve their families. We're here to serve our staff who serve those kids and the broader community. So thinking about feedback around where would you like to see us 5 years from now? What measurable results would you like to see the school district produce for the community when we think about people? We talk about a strategic commitment of learner outcomes, and when people hear learner outcomes, they immediately go to academic results. They think of things like ACT scores, MCA scores, but of course it's about much more than that. We talk about the strong academic outcomes that the district has had, but we also believe that the social is as important as the academic. And we understand that our learners are living, breathing human beings who also are developing themselves at that time. And so making sure that we look at what are the social emotional outcomes that we would like to see from students in the next 5 years as well. We talk about stewardship, and we talk about that in all the ways that you think of stewardship. We're very blessed to have a strong, supportive community. And so how do we manage those resources, both financial and human, to make sure that we're getting the most out of them and getting our public the best bang for the buck, and doing it in a way that is the best use of our staff and our students' time. And we also think about our environmental impact and how the school district is contributing to the greater effort to make sure that our community and state and nation are sustainable. We talk about partnerships. We share that Northfield really has an embarrassment of human resources and riches, right? There are so many people who want to contribute to the school district with their time and their talent. And so really strengthening those partnerships with other governmental organizations and philanthropic groups and service organizations like Rotary and our work with the Chamber, and all of those different partnerships that we have that are so special and make Northfield Northfield. And finally, we talk about equity, making sure that we give each student what they need so that they have the tools and the dispositions to be able to pursue the American dream. And then we talk about equity, it's really about basic human decency. It's really about making sure that everyone has what they need so that we can remove the barriers to help them become successful. So those are the things that we frame. The process is very scalable. We can get a lot of information with just a simple conversation. We use a tool called Jamboard when we're working online together so that we can generate a lot of ideas in a short amount of time. And just having a lot of different discussions and taking all of that information to be able to create a vision and a plan for the next 5 years. We're also using a number of other resources. For example, we did 3 pulse surveys last year. And while a lot of it was focused on that initial pandemic, or the middle pandemic disrupted year, there's a lot of great feedback in those pulse surveys about what the community would like to see the district, where we'd like to be 5 years from now. So we're continuing on. And we use a variety of different pieces of data. It's my role and responsibility to complete the draft of that plan. I'll be sharing a draft with administrators and staff for their review and feedback. We'll polish, give a little bit of feedback before we bring it to you. I plan to bring you a draft of that document on November 8th at our board meeting on November 8th. We're going to plan to schedule a work session in November so that you can really dig deeply into the plan. We don't have work sessions very often, but in this case, this work session will be totally focused on your questions and your input about how the strategic plan is coming and what you'd like to see done differently, things that you like, things you think are strong. And again, it's a one topic meeting. Basically, it's not a business meeting. It's a different configuration. And we just really get to talk about that strategic plan. You'll get another opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback at the November 22nd board meeting, and then we'll seek formal approval at the December 13th board meeting. This is going over several meetings because clearly it's the blueprint that would be used to help guide our decision-making over the next 5 years, and including informing a priority-based budgeting process that we plan to use this winter. We've talked about how we know that no school district can outrun the decades of chronic underfunding that we have worked through. We have been blessed to not have had to make budget adjustments for a long time because of the support of the community and frankly, just the good financial management of the district. But we can't even outrun it. So we have to think differently about budgeting. And so we're going to use the strategic plan to help build the priority-based budget that we will seek a lot of community input for starting in January. So that's the strategic planning process, just to give you that brief update to share where we've been and where we're going, and then how you can expect to see the adoption process here play out over the next 6 to 8 weeks or so.
Excellent. Thank you. Board members, questions, comments?
Question.
Yes, Claudia.
Matt, as we get closer to that January date when things are more polished and more, just worked out, will there be opportunity for the community to give input at that point that could change things significantly?
Yeah, so here's what I would say on that. We've been seeking a lot of community feedback, in the development of the plan. And then since we're going to have it over several weeks, it's going to be over several weeks, we'll of course share it with parents and my family updates. And we would of course invite the public's feedback that we could share with you, during your work session.
At that point, yeah, I'm just thinking, there's been lots of opportunity, to give that input. It's just kind of not a priority right now for some community members. And I think that as we get closer, people are going to get more excited and interested in giving that input. So I just wanted to hear if there'll be opportunity.
And we recognize too that when you're talking about this kind of thing conceptually, right, it's essentially a blank piece of paper, right? And so I think after you have a draft done, people can even become more interested because there's now a little bit more shape and substance. It's very common in this kind of process development. So that's the whole reason of having basically about a little bit more than a month to be able to finalize the plan.
Other questions, comments? Well, I really appreciate the great work you're doing on this and really reaching out and making sure that we really have a broad section of stakeholders weighing in. Would it be unwieldy to do any sort of just online type surveying, or I know it's such an interactive process, which makes it such a good process and a strong process, and you are really skilled at doing that, but I'm just wondering, kind of to dovetail a little bit on what Claudia was saying in terms of what opportunities might there be there? Is there valuable input that could be gleaned from that type of format, or your
Yeah,
thoughts?
absolutely. And I do think that to get the best feedback from the community, it would be after the draft is created. I think it becomes difficult for people when they get in a small group after things get rolling, right? You start to hear the ideas, but we've provided these in-person, pieces for the last several months to be able to try to get people's feedback. I think that it's more productive with an online survey to give people something to look at and react to, as opposed to just share that information on their own. And so I do think that would be the appropriate way to do that.
Excellent, excellent. So it's just been a really great process, and I appreciate, the time we're looking ahead to how the board will get involved and when we will see that, and the opportunities that we will have to weigh in on that as well. So, okay. Well, thank you for that update. You are up next as well for
I am.
the operations and COVID-19 update.
Yes. So in your packet, you have the superintendent's operations update. And as you take a look at that, want to share just a couple of items here. First, we always start with the data. So we've been looking at the Rice County week over week COVID-19 case results. And in the packet, you have the one that goes through September 25th. Of course, they release another graph after we publish the packet on Thursday. So I'm hopeful because we did see a flattening again. So in the week of September 19th to the 25th, we had 188 total cases in the county. And as of the last reporting period, 192. So it's flattened off a little bit, and hopefully this is the sign of the crest of this latest wave. We've had times before where we have thought that was the case. And we're grateful that we are seeing in Northfield that our numbers are really holding compared to the county. So we think a lot of the mitigation strategies that people are using are working, and we are proud that is moving in the right direction. So hopefully we have seen this thing finally crest, and we will see where it goes from here. So that's just the weekly data update. Then what we want to share with you is I want to just you to take a look at given the link in the document to the dashboard. And I think the important part of the dashboard is that we are still, again, holding our own overall. We've added something to the dashboard. We are now seeing that we are offering the district totals for the year at the bottom. And I notice there's a little cleanup at the top of the chart that I need to do. But what we'll see so far is since August 31st, when we began recording cases, we've had a total cumulative cases of 46. That was as of this afternoon. And you think about with 4,400 people, staff and students in the district, not too bad, which we're pleased with. And right now we have a total of 15 active cases across the entire system. Now remember, what we define as an active case is a case that has been reported to us in the last 14 days. So every day, we either add something or we take something off. We usually update the dashboard at least once a day. It's usually in the morning and sometimes multiple times a day. But we did add the district totals to the bottom of the chart so we could continue to provide some context. When there are less than 5 cases at a building, we just denote it as less than 5 rather than giving the raw number. And that's really to try to protect the identity of people who are ill. We talked about going to the raw number, and as we discussed that, we still feel that it's important to try to protect the identities. If we have small numbers, there's a chance people could figure out who, folks who are gone with illness, and we're just trying to protect that for them. So that is the update to the dashboard, which we are pleased with that. Also, we are updating the two really important numbers, the ILI rate and the quarantine rate. So you'll see that we update that usually on Fridays, sometimes on Saturdays, depending on when we get the data. But what we're seeing with the influenza-like illness rates overall, I'm very pleased with the data. Things go up and down, but we had the low last week. We had the Area Learning Center that actually, of course, that's a very small number of students in terms of comparatively in the district, but they had a weekly ILI rate of 0, which is great. Northfield Middle School, Bridgewater, both at around 1.7. You're seeing Greenville Park at just about 2.3. Spring Creek was the highest last week at 3.66. And again, that's the 5-day average. Our quarantine rates are right in line with what we would hope, if not even a little bit lower than what we might think would be. So we're seeing that range from 0.62% at Northfield High School to 4.29% at Spring Creek. And you'll notice that really can change week to week. So we are publishing those weekly student quarantine rates as well. So that's the data. We always start with that. Also, I want to share with you that we have been hearing some struggles from some parents regarding COVID-19 testing within the community that's been challenging. So we all know it's the fall. We know that we are seeing some colds. We are seeing a number of other kinds of illnesses that we normally see this time of school year. But unfortunately, a lot of those illnesses also present some of the similar symptoms that you see with COVID. And so for those people who are following the Minnesota Department of Health decision tree, as we have from the beginning, and what their recommendations, which we follow, are that if you have 2 less common symptoms or one of the more common symptoms, that you need to stay home until those symptoms for 10 days or until those symptoms have gone away, unless you can have a negative COVID test, and then you're able to come back. And we know that there was a lot of COVID testing available last spring. We have been providing optional testing for families, and we've been trying to support families with that using the Vault saliva test, which is a PCR test. And the issue that we have had is that we're just seeing less and less access in the community. So we're hearing from families that with a number of the supports gone from last fall. So last fall, we had the federally supported leave where families had some additional leave time to support their kids. We also had some unemployment insurance that was additionally helpful for people who may have some of those difficult decisions to be able to stay home just because things were unpredictable last year. So we know that there's a lesser access within the community. We've heard even just going to Walgreens, right? That sometimes it can be a couple of day wait to get a test. So the district is going to move ahead in conjunction with the Department of Health and the Department of Education to offer additional optional testing for families. This is just a support system that we are going to try to provide for people who need a test to be able to get their kid back into school. This is one of a couple steps that we're taking. So we're going to continue with the Vault saliva test. It's a very solid test, but the turnaround isn't great, right? It's a couple of days comparatively. So we are excited that we're going to be able to begin offering the Q rapid molecular test for students and staff starting next week, hopefully. We have the tests on site. We are required to have people trained. You don't need to have a medical professional execute this test, but you do have to have people trained. They only train on Tuesdays. We did have 6 staff members who were trained last week. They're really designed to be backup folks, but we also have posted using a statewide grant for at least one, if not more positions, health aid positions to help coordinate those testing opportunities. We'll hold that here at the district office. It's going to be, we decided today it's going to be a drive-through so that people can stay in their cars and we can help them with that. It is what I would call a non-invasive nasal swab test where you just basically use something that looks like a Q-tip. You go up, you take a sample from your nose, and then some people will remember what a zip drive looks like. It looks like you plug it into a zip drive and 20 minutes later you have the results. And so talking with our local epidemiologist and people from the Minnesota Department of Health, this is a very accurate test. It's a molecular test, so it's different than the PCR test, but it has a similar level of sensitivity and it is considered a similar level of accuracy to the PCR tests. And so we're going to try to ramp this up as quickly as we can. Again, it's totally optional. It is simply a service that we plan to provide for people who maybe can't wait a few days. They'd like to be able to get that peace of mind if their student has one of those more common symptoms or two less common symptoms. And we just asked for, I didn't ever think we'd be trying to operate a testing center, right? So really, this shouldn't be our job. But what we want to do is we want to provide this service to families who have that need to get a negative test so that their kid can come back to school. So this is one of a couple of steps that we're doing to try to help reduce those quarantines that none of us want to do, but we know that we need to in certain circumstances. We are also working to pursue using the rapid antigen tests, a product called the Binax Now that is not ready for prime time yet. We have ordered the tests. They can't be here until late October. Again, totally optional. What we're investigating, and this is not finalized yet, but we're investigating something that's called a test to stay approach. So what this would be is when a student has been considered a close contact at school and we've had to have them quarantined. So either one of the people in the interaction wasn't wearing a mask, there's not a vaccination piece, and looking at giving families an option that you could continue to follow the quarantine protocols, or if your student used the rapid antigen test on a daily basis, if they get the negative result, they'd be able to come back to school that day. And the antigen test, when it's given in that serial fashion over the period of several days, it's my understanding in talking with our epidemiologist, it's very sensitive in terms of it will catch something over several days. But we know that quarantine can be very disruptive for families. So this is an ongoing effort to meet our vision of having uninterrupted in-person learning, while at the same time making sure that we are keeping students at school as safe as possible. So this is another layer of mitigation. The Q rapid molecular test, we are almost ready to go with that. It's just about finalizing some of the pieces of how people can make appointments and things like that, what the hours are that we're going to be able to do, et cetera. And then this Binax Now is something else that we're pursuing. We're going to be getting the tests, and then we're hoping to be able to implement what I've described to you here. So these are two, again, pieces that are completely optional for families. It is simply another support so that we can try to keep everybody at school and everybody healthy. We know that this test to stay approach is something that has been studied extensively in Great Britain and has had some very positive results. So again, we are looking at trying to use these evidence-based practices to follow our vision of making sure that every student is able to be experience uninterrupted in-person learning to the best of our ability this school year. So that is our testing. We've offered the Vault saliva tests since last December. So that's not anything new, right? We've been offering those since last December. And the Q test is something we've had an interest in, but it's only recently become available. And to be clear, the state is giving us those tests for free. The grant that we are getting is being used to be able to cover any staffing costs and things like that. And we have a grant from the state for every school in the state had an opportunity for the grant. Very simple application. We have a total of $220,000 that we have from the state for this purpose. So we appreciate that support because we're turning it right around and trying to support families so that we can minimize those very disruptive quarantines when they're not warranted or not needed. The final piece of my report this evening is just want to remember, as much as I don't like to even think about it, even though I do like snow, but we are going to have to think about winter weather related issues. And as previously shared, I shared this in August, just giving you an update. The district does plan to continue using e-learning days this year when winter weather disrupts the ability to transport students to school. Of course, we will have at least one good old fashioned Minnesota snow day. We're still finalizing with with settling our teacher agreement. We did go down to where we can have one snow day first before we move to e-learning, but we have some other work to do to finalize that between 1 and 2 days. And then we're updating the plans right now. We've got a meeting next Monday. I'll share those plans with families just after MEA break. So just so people know that we continue to plan to use those e-learning days that we used before COVID, right? They helped influence how we did move to distance learning. And we're hopeful that we do not use any of them this year, that we have a good, I want for snow lovers, I want them to have enough snow, but it can come on weekends. So that's what we'll do. That's my report for this evening. Be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you. Amy.
Well, Dr. Hillman, I'm very excited about these testing options that you have for students and staff. And I have a couple questions about them. First, about the Q rapid test. Will the people have to stay to get their results, or will they be able to start going about their day and somehow get it texted to them? Or
so we're going to do a little bit of piloting of it later this week. Our current plan would be to be able to share it with them electronically if they so choose. What we're looking at right now is giving people a choice. If you want to wait, stay in your car, no problem. We also could potentially have the option for them to get the results via email.
Okay. And these are still students who are sick though, but they could be allergies, but they could just be a cold. So it's great for them to know that they don't have COVID, but hopefully they'll still go home and take a sick day. I mean, is there any, how are we handling that piece of it?
Yep. So what it does, it gives the confidence that we don't have a COVID-19 case, and that as students are ready, they are able to come back to school.
Okay. And then for the Binax test for the close contacts, is that an at-home test or is that at the testing site as well?
That's a great question. So it is designed as an at-home test, and we are not yet done with the logistics for that. The Binax now, a lot of people successfully do it at home, but if you watch how it is, how you actually provide the test, it is not the simplest thing the first time that you do it. So what we're looking at is kind of a two-step process. We're looking at offering some very early morning hours for that, so people could do the first couple, with us, and then could take it home from there. So again, that's the second on the priority list. So we're still identifying some of the specific strategies and the processes we'll use for that one. But we're talking about the queue. I wanted to share what the next iteration was too. And again, that part is not finalized, but we have the tests coming, and we're going to be working on the implementation of the logistics of that one next.
And I think it's a great approach. I'm wondering how much risk there is if someone was a close contact and they test negative in the morning, but then by afternoon they're positive. I mean, are they very contagious at that point, or is that something that's unusual?
And so when you look at the data and you look at the risk reward, right? When you look at the risk mitigation that we're doing, the fact is this would only be for asymptomatic people, right? So if you have symptoms, this is not the test for you, right? But what is intended is that with each day past that exposure, the likelihood of transmission drops. And so the intent is that we'll get that in the morning. And yes, but every day we have people at school who have the potential to develop those symptoms during the day. We don't know when that's going to happen. This is a way that when we look at the risk mitigation factor and we talk to people who study the data, we feel it is a worthwhile piece to offer, because again, when you're taking that test over a series of days, it's likely to pick up any kind of positive piece over a series. But the moment that you develop symptoms, of course, you go home, and that's when you might take the Q test.
And my last question is there any testing available on weekends if people are part of, athletic teams or in the
to be determined,
or whatever, it's, so we can keep that going?
Yeah, to be determined. I want to be really clear too. We are not a professional medical facility, right? That is not our role. We are not taking the place of all of these other testing environments. I want to be super clear about that, right? We still have a lot of medical pharmacies and other places that can provide the test. We're trying to provide something that is local and as immediate as possible for families. So we are debating and looking at how could we support something on a weekend. It's not out of the question. It's something that we certainly understand that there might be a need for. We're considering and looking how we might be able to staff that. But remember, we're just one part of a larger infrastructure for this. So there are still other pieces, but what we know is people in our community are traveling to get a rapid PCR test and paying a couple of $100s to get it. That is not equitable, right? There are people who can have the vehicle, they have the money, they can do that, and there are other people who can't. And so trying to be able to provide that local opportunity for people we think is important. But we are not going to take the place, right, of some of the other testing centers. We're looking at it as being a value add and something that we can do to help our local school community.
And I assume you'll be tracking overall numbers, like we were able to keep this many kids in school for this many days.
Yep, we will certainly keep that kind of aggregate data.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Great questions. Thank you, Amy. Other questions, comments? Tom?
Are these tests open to the whole community or just to school families?
It's a great question. And the answer is that they're going to be available for students, and they're going to be available for staff. The one stakeholder group that we are still finalizing would be if we have a staff member who lives in another school district whose own child would have to quarantine. Thus, we could have a teacher who might have to be home. We're looking at offering that service to our staff members' children so that we could keep those people and not have to have a substitute, right? We've heard across the country, the substitute shortage is real. And anything that we can do to try to keep that going, but we don't have the capacity to offer it to the larger community. We have been pretty generous in providing the vault tests to if a student has a family member at home who's not feeling well. We've been trying to work very hard to give folks those vault tests regardless of who they are, because we know if there's an issue with the family, we need them to be able to know. That is something we'll still provide. There are no more free vault tests. So the last count, I think we had around 600, I think, a little bit less than 600. So we'll continue to offer those vault tests to people as appropriate. That's something that we feel that we can be generous with in terms of that. We don't know what the Q test and then the Binax test, we don't know what the logistics are of getting replacements yet, because of course, everything with the, with logistics is difficult these days in terms of just how, things get from one place to another. So we're going to start with those groups, Tom, because again, it's not our primary role. We're focusing on serving a very specific group of people for our school district.
Thanks, Tom. Other questions, comments?
I have a quick question.
Yes, Claudia.
At the vault tests at every site?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Every office has an inventory of vault tests. There are some of those that we had purchased before the state started to provide them for free last January. We're probably out of those now. And so now we have the tests that the state had given us last year that were specific for staff. All of those tests have been converted to individual tests. So the vault test has also got a little bit of some hiccups with it, right? Because you have to have a Zoom session with one of the vault employees to be able to take the test. And then because of the way the tests were originally coded, we can't even give the ones that we have left to people and have them mail them in on their own. They have to bring them all back to school, and then we have to put them in a bag and we send them off the vault. So there's just a piece of how those were initially coded that we have to do it that way. So great service, right? It's a good thing that we're doing for families, but at the same time, it is not all as convenient as it could be.
Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for your thoughts on that. It seems to me we're 18 months into this. This kind of testing seems like it should have been quote unquote out and available a lot earlier. And I'm just wondering if there's anything, as far as state or federal money that should really fund something. This would be example for COVID, but part of that also with the protocol is, there isn't really much talk about any therapeutics. If somebody's sick, is there a preferred list that the county and the state and the whatever is agreeing upon that are good therapeutics to use? I'm not even here. I don't hear much on that. So.
Yeah, Jeff, that's a great question. And I think that what I have understood from public health folks is that there's really some really wonderful enhancements and improvements in those therapeutic areas. We've recently heard about a pill, right, that is coming on the market that would really help and avoid hospitalization. So I think, Jeff, that goes to where there's the difference between, we are not medical professionals, right? So the things that we are offering are things that we are able to be trained and we are able to offer those to our families. When you get to the therapeutic piece, Jeff, I think that's where I would say to people, talk to your own medical doctor, right? Because I just don't think that's a place we can, even if we wanted to, I don't think that we could get there. That's not the kind of thing that we should have to offer, nor would we have the skill to do so. But what I would say to people is, if you're looking at those therapeutics, I don't know a lot about them, Jeff, because they're just not something that we have had to deal with here at school. But I do know there's really some great enhancements and improvements in those areas. And for people interested in that, I think talking with their physician is the best way for them to learn what's the appropriate methods or the approved methods for that.
And then thank you. If there's this test is available and you're out of school for a few days and you get back in sooner. I don't know what the cost is per test, but is there a recommended place to go or a fee to pay where somebody could take this test to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I think the key thing is that's why we're trying to do some of this testing on campus, Jeff, because we are able to have a little bit more control over that. I'm not going to say it's going to be perfect because we don't know. Maybe we'll have lots of appointments for people. But at the same time, my sense is that the appointments, what my understanding is the appointments at places that have them where you can pay for them, or there are still some free testing sites, they are gone pretty quickly. So within the community, there's limited availability. You can get it through the hospital and a line of clinic and Walgreens. But again, sometimes those appointments are booked out several days. And so we're just trying to add another piece. And to my knowledge, I don't know, I should take that back. I don't know whether the hospital and clinics use the Q tester. I know they have a number of different tools that they use. So from the cost perspective, Jeff, it will be free to the stakeholders that I mentioned, to our students, to our staff, and then possibly to the children of our staff, depending on how we're able to finalize that. So what we do here is free. There are some other free sites. So there's, for example, there are some free sites in Faribault, but you also have a number of private firms in Lakeville and in Burnsville that you can go to for those and pay for it. So I to answer your question about the testing capacity, Jeff, I think what happened is I think like everything else in the summer, as we saw vaccinations increase and we saw the cases decrease, I think the companies that provided those tests, and I think even the state will say, they had a lot of community-based testing centers and they just retracted and they downsized their ability to do that. So that's why when we've seen this increase, they just have not been able to increase the capacity like they did last spring. So we can't wait for other people. We really want to make sure that those families who have a need for this can have access to it. Someone has told me they can give it to me for free. They've told me they can give me money to train and do some staffing with this. And so that's what we are getting the state money for that. So I would say the state is funding it. Will it be enough? Our calculations are we should be able to do the staffing for the year within the capacity that we have. And as long as they continue to offer the tests for free, I think it's a service that we can provide. Again, not one, if you'd ever told me that a few years ago that we'd be thinking about this, I would have said, are you serious? And, but it is what it is because we have to try to keep removing the barriers for families to the best of our ability.
Corey.
Thanks, Matt. Just like to echo my appreciation for this program being implemented. I know a number of families who've had to drive to Egan, spend $250 in the middle of the week, take off work to just have ease of mind, because like you said, could be run-of-the-mill allergies, could be cold, could be a number of things. My own family, week ago Sunday, my kids were both feeling under the weather. They ticked the boxes. We had to go up to Lakeville on Sunday. Didn't find out till Tuesday that it was negative, which is obviously great. And then we had to make our own determination, but it would have been nice to know Monday morning instead as a parent. So appreciate this being an opportunity for families to take advantage of.
And Corey, just on that note, we're going to be notifying families of this program in the weekly email, or now it's every other weekly email that will go out either tomorrow or Wednesday. And again, we'll conceptualize the program like I've shared tonight. And then once we have the appointment system and things like that down, we'll share those other details. And just so people know, this program will most likely start smaller than what it will end up being. So we will start with lesser capacity just to be able to make sure we know what we're doing and that we have the ability to carry out what we are saying we're going to carry out. So anticipate it's going to start slow, and then we'll try to expand capacity as we are able.
Other questions, comments? Yes, I mean, this is an incredible program, and it really is going to be a game changer. And what I appreciate is that we really are trying to really understand every situation. And we do have, fortunately, not a lot of people in quarantine, but one is an impact on that one student and that one family. So I think we're really demonstrating our commitment that we have said all along. We're going to keep students and staff healthy and safe as we can, but with the goal of keeping people in the classroom. And so this is really a great program. And I think that you can report on this and we can sort of get a sense for what this takes, but I don't think any of us really understand logistically what.
I don't think we know what it takes quite
Right.
yet, but we're going to learn. We've got a history of being able to do things that are hard fairly quickly. So
Excellent. I mean, the way we do things is always done incredibly well, and the details are really well covered. And I think we have to acknowledge Anita Ozzie at this point, because she is really shouldering just her more than her share of making sure the logistics on this are put together, and that this testing will be successful. So just really thank you for really taking this on, because you wouldn't have had to do it, but we understand it is important. We are all very supportive of it, and supportive of and grateful for the efforts that it's going to take to pull this off. So what I was wondering then too, if you could clarify I've heard when I've talked to people in the community. So we are corresponding with with our families, and in two ways, with an exposure notification and with a close contact notification. And when we look at the current high school, where we have less than 5 current cases at Northfield Middle School and 7 current cases at Northfield High School, yet as a high school parent or a middle school parent, you may be getting numerous exposure notifications. So just sort of clarify that with the other communication they get around close contact. And then my second question there would be, would we add anything to these letters in terms of the testing capabilities?
Yeah, that's a excellent question. And the notification process, going back to last year can be challenging. So you're right, Julie, we are providing for people a general exposure notification. If I'm in an elementary classroom, you're getting one of those, but there is the potential, since we are offering that general exposure notification at the secondary level, where, one person could get a few of those, and that can be a little bit disheartening. We feel it's an important duty of care to inform people. As you know, we've used that MIT tool extensively to be able to look at how we can keep people as safely in places as practicable. We know that MIT research showed that the physical distancing did not play as much of a role as we originally thought it did, or as the scientists originally thought it did. So making sure that people know that there was an exposure in the classroom, we think is important. We are working on tweaking the letter. The letter that we had from last year that we started to use is quite extensive. There's a lot in it. And so we're looking at how can we pare that down to the essential pieces, share with folks that just because you're receiving this, clear that you don't need to quarantine. This is just for you so that you can keep an eye for any symptoms that you might have. And then in addition, offering that opportunity for sharing with people where they might be able to get testing, et cetera. And then if there is a person who is a person who needs to be quarantined, they get a different level of communication. Of course, that's far fewer people this year in any instance than it was last year. In many cases, there's a specific email that comes from Cheryl Hall, who's our COVID coordinator, that talks about that quarantine component. And in some cases, depending on there's no two of these situations that are same. In some cases, people are getting a phone call depending on what time of day it is and things like that. So we have some work to polish the general notification letter and looking at what's the minimal amount of information that we can give to people so they understand what we're talking about and yet not make it seem like it's a mortgage application, if you will.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so that is the COVID-19 and operations update. So thank you. We can move on now to approval of the consent grouping. As a reminder, there were a few personnel items in the table file that were added to the consent grouping. Is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping? Moved by Tom. Is there a second? Second by Amy. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on now to items for individual action. We have 2 this evening. I think I will ask Dr. Hillman to present the addendum to the COVID-19 protocol update. And then prior to questions or comments, I will ask for a motion.
Yes, this evening I'm asking the board to consider one change to what was previously called the State High School League Governed Activities, change the name to State High School League Governed Activities and Fall Play Protocols. So what we've added is that the Northfield High School Fall Play is drama's equivalent of a varsity activity. And so those students, as they have been practicing, have been masking in school or during their practices based on the addendum that we had adopted back in August. This is a varsity level equivalent activity. And so I'm requesting that there be a change specifically for those student performers only during the week of their, what they call their tech week rehearsal. So that's kind of a series of final rehearsals before their public performances, where the performers who are on stage may remove their masks. When they go back off stage, they put their masks on, similar to how in our volleyball program, if you're on the court and you're playing, you can be unmasked. The moment that you go to the sidelines, you put your mask on. So this would be for those student performers as they go on stage. And then as they go off stage, they'd put their masks on. Everyone else who is part of that would be masked, including all of the audience members. And so again, this is specifically to add this exception for our student performers who are in our fall play during those tech week rehearsals, often called a series of dress rehearsals, as well as their public performances. And my understanding is that we are also going to eliminate the first two middle rows of seating to provide that greater distance between the stage and the players. This is an interactive play, so the audience actually even votes on the ending and some things with that. So we're taking some other precautions because students use more than just the stage. But in general, these would be the exceptions, again, trying to make it analogous to what that varsity level indoor activity would be.
Excellent. Okay, so with that, explanation of the motion, I'll ask for a motion and then we can have questions and comments. So is there a motion to approve the update to the high school activities COVID-19 safety protocols addendum? Moved by Amy. Is there a second? Second by Tom. Questions or comments? Amy?
As a parent of someone who's always involved in theater and music, I'm very excited that you're adding this to the protocol. I think that's a great idea. My question is a more general one. I know as there have been more outbreaks of COVID in schools around the state, there's a lot more schools that have mask policies now that didn't at the beginning of the school year. And I'm wondering if at the league level, there's any additional talk about asking the spectators to wear masks, or if there might be, if you see anything like that happening in the future or anything in that direction.
Yeah, the league just recently came out with their latest revisions, and it does not include anything for spectators. And we are seeing, as you know, I think we're down to one school in the Big Nine that does not have some kind of mask requirement. Now, a lot of them are all over the board, right? Some are only K-8, some are K-12, but they end at 3:45 for the end of the school day. I know that, we continue to look at what are the best ways that we can support and keep all of our athletic seasons going. So at this point, Amy, I have not heard any discussion of that at the league level.
Thank you.
So do you want just quickly review what our spectator policy is at this point?
Yeah, right now, the addendum here talks about that our spectators only for Minnesota State High School League activities, that it is a strongly recommended mask requirement, but it is not required at this point. Of course, we are always looking at that, and we're looking at seeing if there are anything that's associated with those kinds of events, but that's what our current State High School League State High School League protocol is.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. I just want to comment that, the work that you do to initially establish safety protocols and then being able to really see that those need to evolve, and that there's areas where we have to emphasize more, some of the protocols where maybe there's misunderstanding or it has become a little bit more of an issue, and really wanting to balance how we communicate that with families. And so the work continues to evolve as the variant evolves, as therapeutics evolve, as testing evolves, as all of that evolves. So it's constantly a moving target. And I know that you take this very seriously in terms of looking at what we need to do to be in the best position. And I think this addendum is an example of where we're evolving, and we are adjusting, as we have said we would do, where see opportunities to adjust. So thank you for bringing this forward. Yes, Amy.
I have another question. I realize that we don't specifically say anything about choir performances, orchestra performances, other art type events.
Yeah, those.
We need to say something.
Yeah, not as of yet. So we're getting ready to go into that season, and we're starting to look at those things. It's possible we could bring some things back for that. We're going to see how this part goes, and then we'll adjust on that as needed.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the addendum to update the COVID-19 safety protocols for the fall play at Northfield High School. So with a motion and a second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our last item for, oh, I'm
We had some
sorry.
policies.
Yes, I did take the items for individual action out of order, so I apologize for that. We do need to go back to policy approval. And that, as you recall, was first reading at our last board meeting for policies 102, 406, and 413. So I would ask for a motion to approve those three policies. Again, policy 102, 406, and 413 as presented. Moved by Amy. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. Are there any questions or comments?
I had a comment.
Yes, Claudia.
So 102, and I think I kind of was playing with this last time that we met over these. 102 refers to policy 413. And then it says that refer to policy 413 for information about the types of conduct that constitute a violation on harassment and violence. When I go to 413, I don't see, in some policies, there's an actual section that's a definition of, and I don't see that in 413. The violence one is pretty, straightforward, but the harassment part, I just feel like it would be helpful to have a definition of harassment as the district sees, but
Yep, and Claudia, there is that definition. So what we have you approve is the policy portion. And then if you look at 413 on the website, you'll see that there is a set of procedures that go with that in a reporting form. And the definitions are outlined in the procedures there.
so it's not necessary then to have harassment outlined and defined in the policy, just in the procedure.
Right, we have it outlined. In fact, in the procedure, we have assault, harassment, and immediately defined. Then we define the updated protected classifications. We talked about that the last time. And then go specifically through the sexual harassment definition. We define things like remedial response. There's a number of different terms that are in that procedure. And one of the reasons that we use the procedure is that this is a policy that has been routinely changed by, or the definitions, I should say, not the policy. The definitions have routinely been changed by the state. And we're always going to make sure we're in alignment with what the state pieces are. So we put that in procedure so that we can be nimble and be able to adjust those as needed. But I understand where you're coming from. It's one of the few, in a lot of our policies, you'd see that this is within the policy. In this case, it is in the accompanying procedure that is right with the policy.
Could there be a consideration to put a link to that procedure, even if as a board, we don't have, a
Yeah.
say in the procedure, but there's a link in the
Absolutely.
policy?
Yep. In terms of, we can certainly add a link to the procedure, and that's a holdover from days when you didn't put hyperlinks in procedure. So we can absolutely add, as long as, if you want to move ahead with that piece, that just understand that we'll make that adjustment to be able to include a link to the procedures, we'd be happy to do that. And when you look at it on the website, you see the policy and then the procedures listed right underneath it. But I think it's user friendly. We're working more and more on that to include those kinds of links within policy documents. Good feedback.
Excellent. Thank you, Claudia. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of adopting policy 102, 406, and 413 as presented with the modification as discussed, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed opposed, I'm sorry. All those say aye. Okay, motion carries. Sorry, off my game. All right, so great. So that is, we just had 2 items for individual action tonight. So we can go to items for information. Our first is the long-awaited October 1st enrollment report. Dr. Hillman.
Yes. So let's take a look at the enrollment report. And what we are seeing is at the beginning of this year. So the October 1st date is an important count. And I want to point out that we're going to specifically focus on the full-time students. Remember, the overall enrollment report also includes early childhood students. And that number typically increases through the year as students become qualifying for special education services. And also that larger number also includes students who are part-time at the area learning center. So we serve a number of surrounding school districts and other schools for credit recovery. So we will every year you'll always see the ALC independent study number increase. So we want to take a look specifically at the full-time students. So as of October 1, we were looking at 3,810 students. That's down about 20 from last year, the last enrollment report at the end of last year, which is 3,832, which is pretty darn close to, I think, what Val projected in terms of that, awfully close. Now, remember, we've been talking about declining enrollment for 8 years. Since our last demographic study with Hazel Reinhardt. I should have mentioned this during the strategic planning update. We are waiting for the latest demographic study and housing study from Hazel Reinhardt. We should have that, I think, fairly soon. That's part of our strategic planning process. But the previous one that Hazel did 8 years ago projected we'd go down by about 200 students over a 10-year period. And it's nearly coming out exactly as she had predicted, very close. So here's a couple of things when you say, oh, we lost 22 students. Well, we have been projecting that we're going to have declining enrollment, but here's the stat that I think shows that there's a lot more to the story. And there's another thing coming that is going to be very helpful in us taking a look at the deep dive of enrollment. So in 2021, we graduated 326 students, but only brought in 243 kindergartners this fall. So when you think about a group that is leaving 326 and you bring in a kindergarten group of 243, the fact that we're only down 22 students shows that we have some other items going on. Now, we typically do see about a 20 student increase or so when we go from 5th to 6th grade. Most students from, well, I shouldn't say most, a lot of Prairie Creek students do matriculate into the Northfield School District. So we tend to see that kind of bump. We'll also see a little bit more of a bump when students come to Northfield High School as other St. Dominic's and some of those filter into the high school as well. So I think that that's a big analysis there. Now, importantly, if you remember last year, we had what we called the kindergarten red shirt phenomenon. And so last year, at the end of last year, we had a total of 204 kindergartners. And so this year, that 243 number is pretty significant. So when you graduate 326 and bring in 243 and you stay within about 20 students, that's pretty good. Now, the next step that's coming, I don't know if we'll have it for the next board meeting or not, but something that's called the enrollment options report. This is an exhaustive report that shows every resident student and where they're going to school. So we will know exactly, where students have open enrolled to, if they are resident districts and have done traditional open enrollment to another district. We will see the number of students coming into the district from other traditional public school districts. We'll have a charter by charter school count of where our students are going. Online schools, basically any place that a resident student is going, we will see that accounted for in aggregate. So that's another layer of the enrollment report that's important to see where those students who are residents who aren't attending Northfield Public Schools, where are they going? And then also to see when we have students coming into Northfield Public Schools, where are they coming from? I do think one other piece to notice, which I think is a clear assessment of how development has both stayed stable and has stalled, is you will see that Greenvale Park is no longer the smallest elementary school in the Northfield School District. They have overtaken Sibley by Spring Creek by 14 students. And so I think that goes to show that we are really in need of development in the southeast part of the city. So we know that we've got Bluffview coming. We know we have a couple of other developments happening in the southeast portion of the city. We know there's some development also happening on the north side of the city, or some planned development on the north side of the city. And so we now have a situation where Bridgewater is 100 students more than both of the other two elementary schools. So that is a part that we have to closely watch. We have to watch the development both in that Spring Creek neighborhood and in the Greenvale Park neighborhood. We're seeing continued development places like Bridgewater Heights and some other things in Dundas that have kept those Bridgewater numbers, I think, fairly stable, though they're a little bit less than what we've seen over the past several years. So the October 1 enrollment report is important because it is what does a lot of things for us in terms of funding initially. Now, if you remember from Val's levy report at the last meeting, there's a multi-year cleanup process. So even though this is the number that we're using right now and what our calculations will be based on for the year, they will clean that up based on actual numbers over the next couple of years. So the initial enrollment report is always exciting. We're within 20 students of where we were last year. And when you see the total number that graduated versus the total number of students that have come in, that's a pretty significant spread. And to keep it within 20 students, I think says a lot about where we are. And we're looking forward to that enrollment options report. Believe it or not, it does take some time to sort some of those things out, because everybody has to make their October 1 report. So we actually really, somebody could tell us they're going to another system, but until they're actually claimed in the MAR system, that's a whole nother story. So you'd think, well, you should know where people are. Yes, you'd think so, but from time to time, that number, that data isn't clear until the state actually gets the data with the October 1 submissions. So that is the enrollment report. I'd be happy to offer any further analysis that board members would like.
Amy.
So I have two questions, and I think you just answered my first question, which is the reason why the numbers went down between September 9th and October 1st is because of the settling of the MARS system in
Absolutely,
the
yep.
database. And so these numbers, are these numbers from our computer or are they from the state's computer or
Yep.
a combination?
These are from this is our data that we are tracking here.
Okay, but we lost 25 students to somewhere else in the state.
So
Somehow.
typically what that most often is not all of them, but a bulk of them are people who leave and don't tell us, right? And so then they may show up on the first day of school at another site. We finally get the records requests. And then we do have a little bit of other shakeout as the year begins. But the bulk of that initial drop is that we had you on our list to come to school and then you didn't show up. And we try to find out where you are and we finally get a records request. And so that's what you see, that little shakeout over the first few weeks. That's
Okay.
the bulk of it.
Thanks. That's my first question, and I understand a lot better now. My second question is, Maura, could you speak on what happened to the kids who deferred kindergarten last year? Where did they end up in the system this year? Did they end up in kindergarten? Did they end up in first grade? Something else?
I am not aware. I'm not saying it's an impossibility. I am not aware of anyone who delayed kindergarten for a year last year who chose first grade. I think they could have talked about that, right? But I am not aware of anyone who did not complete a kindergarten program last year somewhere, who came into the district this year right in first grade. So my analysis would be they are all in kindergarten.
So does that mean our kindergarten size, which is we're considering small, is actually kind of a bump because we have extra kindergartners who would have otherwise been in first grade except for COVID?
So that is probably a fair analysis. What I'll say is that we have been, so if you take a look at the second page of the enrollment report and we take a look at those kindergarten numbers. So you'll see at Greenville Park, for example, where they have a fairly large kindergarten class. So if you look at their kindergarten class, we were talking about a kindergarten class of 88 at Greenville Park this year. And so when you look at that, we have that group in 5 sections. That's some where we use the ESSER 2 funds. That was the second round of federal funding where we gave additional FTE to each elementary school. Greenville Park chose to put that into their kindergarten. So they have 5 sections. So that's an example of, thankfully, we have the space at that building. So those class sizes, individual class sizes range from, there's 17, 18. There are 3 sections at 18, 2 at 17. You'll look at Spring Creek, again, where they have one of the lowest kindergartens that they've had. So last year's kindergarten actually is even smaller. Interestingly enough, Spring Creek's first grade group is still in 3 sections this year. They're at like 64 total students in first grade. So there's another backup, Amy, of how those students came into kindergarten as opposed to first grade. And when we look at their kindergarten with 70, one of their smaller classes over the last several years, they're averaging both 17 and 18 students per class. Bridgewater is a couple more. They're roughly 20, 21. They've got one at 22. Part of that is that, of course, with 100 more kids at Bridgewater, they really have limited space to add. They've added some sections, right? But they had to look at where could they add sections. And so they chose to do them. One, I believe, is in 5th grade or 4th grade. They've added 1 section at 1 grade level. I'm trying to analysis. That's a 2nd grade. They added an additional section. So they have 5 sections of 2nd grade. And they have a little bit of space limitations there to be able to add additional sections. So, but if you look at those class sizes, the class sizes of our elementary schools are pretty outstanding. When you look at Greenville Park, the largest class that you have is a Compañeros class in 4th grade with 24. That's the largest class size at Greenville Park total. When you look at Spring Creek, the largest class size again is 23. And that is again, a 3rd grade Compañeros class. And you do get a little bit bigger. You've got a 3rd grade class and a 5th grade class at Bridgewater where you're at 26. But again, that is substantially better than what we've seen in the last several years. And this is a result, of us using some of our ESSER2 funds to make sure that we're supporting those extra sections at those elementary schools.
Can I add to that?
Please do, Val.
So another thing specific to your kindergarten comment, last year we had 204 kindergartners. And this year we have 232 first graders. So that would tell me that we had kids going elsewhere or maybe homeschooling for kindergarten who chose to come here for first grade, which might be part of that group. We also had a really large birth year for our kindergarten group. So that could be the increase in the kindergarten this year, and the increase from first grade is the red shirted kindergartners. So that would be just another analysis, but again, without knowing which specific students, it's kind of a guessing game.
There's one more item I'd like to point out that I should have pointed out, but it's just part of our system now. But why don't you look at the Portage numbers? So we have 106 students who are choosing Portage. And when we look at the next month's enrollment options report, I believe you're going to see, it's not a significant number, but we have started to see the first handful of students who are open enrolling to Northfield specifically for the Portage program. So students who are living in another community elsewhere who are choosing our all the time online program. And we do anticipate that growing as those programs develop. We've had some very good feedback on the updates to those programs that we've made this year. Again, it's a very specific group of people who when we aren't required to have distance learning, there is a very specific group of people who want that. And our goal is to be able to compete with a lot of other districts to be able to have some students who might choose our program as opposed to their home program.
Do we tell people when they tell us that they're homeschooling that, oh, we have this great Portage option now, and so they understand?
People are aware of all of the different options, that they have, homeschooling being one of them. And actually, we have a long history of having an excellent relationship with our homeschool students. So for years, we have had a shared time enrollment program. So it is totally common for a homeschooled student to take a couple of classes, mostly at Northfield High School. You don't really start to see it until you get to Northfield High School. Often students will participate in a music course, or they may participate in like a lab science course or things like that. So homeschool families right now can take up to 2 on-campus classes. And I do think that you're going to see that will be the eventual evolution of Portage. We will see where some students are taking some online courses and a couple of courses here at school, or vice versa. So that's not right now. That's as we continue to grow that program for resident students. I think you're going to see a little bit more. Hybrid is not a word I can use anymore because that has a specific connotation that people remember, but more of a blended approach I think you're going to see as that program develops.
Are the distance students for Portage, are they more in the older grades or the younger grades?
That's a great question. We have the data for you right here. So when we take a look at our Portage program, we are taking a look at that you have basically some really small numbers in elementary school. You've got ranging from 2 to 9. And remember, we're doing some multi-age classrooms with Portage in our elementary. We have learned a lot from our friends at Prairie Creek about multi-age classrooms. And so that's what we're doing in that case. You'll see we have a total of 24 middle schoolers and a total of 52 high schoolers.
And I wasn't specific enough in my question. I meant, are this people who are open enrolling into Portage mostly in younger grades or older grades?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't have the enrollment options report yet, but we will know very soon.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Tom?
So you said homeschool can take up to 2 classes. Are we compensated for that?
Correct. Yes, we get the state aid for those 2 courses, Tom.
Okay. And then the numbers of the graduated versus the kindergarten, has that ratio stayed the same, up, down? And the difference is then what, made up by open enroll students typically, or?
I'm going to look to Val because Val is the keeper of the history of enrollment. I would say that this is probably typical for the last several years, not typical before that. Since we started to see the declining enrollment, we've seen the graduating classes outpace the kindergartens fairly significantly, but I think that's always been somewhat the case because we do have two elementary schools, St. Dominic and Prairie Creek, where students do go into kindergarten as well. So Val, why don't you provide your analysis?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I would say historically, if you look at it, it's pretty common for our graduating class to be higher because of the options we have in the community. But typically what we've seen is that increase in sixth grade and then again in ninth grade has kind of, that's where that balance comes in, is those 2 years with the way the options in the community flow and the students that choose Northfield schools at that point in their education career. So overall, it always looks like that. But I think it's the part in the middle that's slowing, which makes that difference more impactful. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Great questions. Any other questions or comments on the enrollment report? Okay, so we'll move on to two fun things happening: school lunch week and school bus safety week. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, we have school lunch week coming up October 11th through the 15th. And it's always a good time of year to remind people that the National School Lunch Program serves 30 million children in every school day. And that President John Kennedy created National School Lunch Week in 1962 to promote the importance of a healthy school lunch in a child's life and the impact it has inside and outside of the classroom. And we are really lucky. Stephanie Strummy, our child nutrition director, is top shelf. She is amazing. And they are still struggling a little bit with some staffing, right? They're down just a couple of people. But her leadership has allowed those systems to function very well. So if anybody knows of anybody who's looking for a child nutrition job, we've got a few of them available. But these folks are awesome. I mean, they have some struggles, right? We've all heard of some of the supply chain issues that schools across the country are dealing with. We have heard about the significant shortage in employees, right, that we're seeing in a lot of other food service industries, including child nutrition departments across the state and nation. And our child nutrition department just says, what do I need to do next? Right? So they just simply say, what problem do we have to solve? And it's how do we fix it? So I hope that people will take a moment during school lunch week to just send a shout out to their local or their building level child nutrition staff, just to thank them for the effort that they are making to provide really quality, nutritious meals for kids every day. So that is school lunch week. Can I go right on to school bus safety week?
Absolutely.
Okay, so school bus safety week is October 18th to the 21st. And it's a situation where we are trying to make sure we continue to educate parents and students, teachers, motorists, school bus operators, school administrators, and other folks to join forces and address the importance of school bus safety. So it's really, that week is designed to really focus on school bus safety, to make sure people do things like stop at the stop arm and make sure that they don't pass when the red lights are on, things that I think most of us take for granted, but that we still need to remind drivers about that. So school bus safety week is coming up the 18th through the 22nd. And we always know there's quite a bit of activity during that week to share information with the community.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments on the school lunch week and school bus safety week? Yes, I'm glad you highlighted the important work that Stephanie and her group does. And of course, we will never forget the hundreds of thousands of meals that they provided for students during COVID. I just was, if you would have said, like you had similarly said, if anyone would have told them what they would have been doing for the last 2 years, in terms of providing lunches through all of those challenges, they wouldn't have believed you, but they executed it extremely well. So we are grateful to them. And of course, we're grateful to Benjamin Bus for the work they'll do this week, trying to engage our students in how they need to be safe on the bus. And they do it in creative and fun ways. So we're grateful for that also.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that is our items for information. Our future meetings, Monday, October 25th. Is a regular school board meeting, 7 p.m. here in the district office boardroom. And then our annual World's Best Workforce presentation will be done on Monday, November 8th, here in the district office boardroom at 6:15 p.m. Followed that same evening, Monday, November 8th at 7 p.m. regular school board meeting. So that is October and November. Just want to thank audience members for being here and engaging in our important work. With that, I ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Noel. Is there a second? Second by Jeff. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.